Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Friday. It is January the 23rd, and I finally hit my groove here in Las Vegas, which means it's time to go home. And for the first time this week, you guys are getting one where I have actually had a cup of coffee. As much as I dislike this brand of coffee, it's what's available. So you're going to get a caffeinated show. You're going to get a handful of things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a new article that came out in the New York Times about Kash Patel. Just surprise her. It is not very nice. It is not a very thoughtful piece about Mr. Director Patel. So be it. There's also a profile about his lovely girlfriend in Vanity Fair. I don't know if that's a commentary of anything of interest. They do actually cover on some things that are not usually reported, and they missed on some of the stuff that I think is also interesting that the audience in America in general should actually know about this lady who is a very unusual country singer, considering she basically didn't spend any time in the country. That's not a requirement to be a country singer, but it is something that people usually lean on for credibility and sort of like their song material and so on. So that's kind of fun. Big story of the week, I suppose, is they finally arrested someone. No, it was no one you've heard of. It was the lady who went out there and invaded a church that was in Minneapolis. Actually had a nice elevator ride not too long ago, a couple days ago, with someone who said that, with one of the gentlemen on the floor, actually, who let me know his family actually attended that church that was interrupted. And it turns out they didn't actually get them for the church interruption. So we haven't seen the charging document outside of the complaint, or at least I have not yet. But I'm very interested in that. We're going to go over the process because I think people in general like to hear magistrate judge, complaint, grand jury, etc., how all that kind of stuff works out. And then we're going to touch a little bit on crime stats. And lastly, but not least, Dan Bongino decided to go out there on the Hannity show and issue some slop. It seems like the old Dan Bongino is back. So he's kind of got his stride. He feels like he's back and full of all the BS that he likes to sling. And you can even tell by the energy level. We'll do a little bit of Bongino versus Bongino, which is the thing that we like to do here every once in a while. But I'm going to go over the charges that were in Minnesota. And we'll see. I've got a couple of little things here. Last and not least, I guess as well, we'll also talk about something that got passed. Big complaints against Tom Massey again. Donald Trump taking some stabs at him, and I'm going to show you why he's still my favorite congressman, even though he's not my congressman. All right, that's where we're going to go with today's program, so I hope you guys will stick around with it. Let's go ahead and get started with a sponsor read from our friends over at Patriot Protect. It is more relevant than ever, I would suggest to you. Patriot Protect is keeping an eye on your digital footprint. It's like your own little digital security team. 100 million Americans were exposed to healthcare ransomware attacks. That's interesting. I just got a notice from Blue Cross Blue Shield, which I haven't had for years, since I was a federal agent. But they just let me know that they had a data breach, and all of me and my children, it didn't have my wife's name in there for some reason, but the rest of us were apparently all exposed. This is a more and more regular problem. It's a frequent thing. You'll check your mailbox and find out suddenly someone has pulled your identity, or they have attacked some sort of database somewhere, and now they have access to your private stuff. What do they do with that? They don't usually use it. They turn around and they sell it to some idiot who's going to try to scam you. So if you guys want to make yourself less in danger, if you want to lower your threat profile, which is something I recommend doing, you're going to do so by going to patriot-protect.com/KYLE. When you check out, use promo code Kyle, KYLE. Save yourself 15% on the annual subscription. It's relatively inexpensive. It's probably about the same cost as this cup of coffee on a monthly basis, and this coffee isn't that great. So guys, check it out. Make sure you guys are keeping yourself away from things like the complex AI-based voice impersonations, text messages that emulate your family members and so on. You don't want these people targeting you, and they do it with your name, your address, your phone number, your family members' names, and so on. They can buy all this stuff online for very, very cheap, and then they can turn around and try and turn it into big dollars with your hard-earned money. Patriot-protect.com/KYLE, Patriot-protect.com/Kyle. There's a link in the show description. Let's kick it into today's Friday show. Yes, there's no Steve Friend. All right, my friends. Well, let's do New York Times. I don't know. I had a couple of you guys send it to me, and it was in the Suspendables group chat, and it's kind of interesting in so much as, it's not a nice piece. Here's the best part about the New York Times. I can talk to people at the New York Times. I gave an interview for this New York Times story. They wanted to confirm some things that I had said. They wanted to list me as a far-right or a right-wing podcast host. For those of you guys who know what I don't think that I'm actually all that right-wing. I mean, I think I'm very conservative, but I don't think that that is right-wing in America. This concept that I've kind of pushed out to you of a bacon cheeseburger nationalist, I do think is still the dominant culture. And so it's not left or right, it's just American. And so when they asked if they could quote me as a MAGA-aligned right-wing podcaster, I said no to the MAGA part. Not because I have some beef with MAGA per se, but I'm just not that guy. I don't own the red hat. I've said it probably 5 times since I've been here in Vegas. It's more and more obvious to me. But I do sit in this sort of center position of American culture. I believe things that people believed in the 90s, and I don't think that's wild. I believe things that people believed in the 80s, and Democrats would have agreed with me right up until sometime maybe in the George Bush era where they started calling him a Nazi, and maybe in the Obama era when things really went off the rails. But I don't think that my ideas are fringe, and I certainly don't think they're right wing. So when they went out and quoted me on that, they actually they landed at a thing. And this is a reason why you talk to people you don't agree with. You guys aren't going to like this as much. It's really true. I had a back and forth discussion with somebody, and I pointed out with questions, what does that mean? I don't know what right wing means. I don't know what far right means. Are you implying that I'm a Nazi? Is that where you're trying to go with this? I don't think that's accurate. And at the end of it, I said, I'm a regular Catholic husband, military veteran who served in law enforcement. That's what I am. I go to church. I shake hands with my neighbors. I look them in the eye, like many and most of you. I've worked jobs that I got paid far too little for and busted my ass. I've worked jobs where I got paid really decently, and I felt like it may have been over what I was earning at that time. That's what I am. That's what many of you are, to be fair. You're just people. You're not far right, far left. You may put the label conservative on, but it wouldn't have been something that people would have known you by 25 years ago. So why is it that we're here? And that partisan sort of thing, the reason why you engage with these people, unlike an example I'm going to show you afterwards, the Dan Bongino getting his mojo back where he goes out and calls people dipwads and they don't know what they're talking about. Some of us actually do, Dan. All right. This is why it's interesting you engage with these people, because you can actually educate them and they will move their position. And I'm going to show you on this particular article. You need leadership that believes in nonpartisan independence of the agency. They quoted David Sundberg, the former assistant director in charge of the Washington field office. I don't know Dave Sundberg I don't know him personally. I know him by reputation. And what he means by nonpartisan, and this is really the really key thing, there is no such thing as an independent executive agency. I don't know where they thought that was happening. We saw that under the Biden administration. There was no such thing as an independent, nonpartisan FBI. The nonpartisan FBI went after all of Biden's enemies, to include the MAGA extremists, which they called militia, or no, what do they call them? Anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremists. They created a title to go after Donald Trump's supporters. That should tell you everything about the nonpartisan nature. What they mean when they say nonpartisan and independent. And I'm going to translate for Mr. Sundberg, and he's welcome to post something in disagreement. I think nonpartisan independent means the FBI should always look out for the FBI. And I say that as a former FBI agent, believing that that's what the agency does. That's going to be something that is hard for FBI agents to swallow. And they quoted some of the worst people that came out of that agency. And they quoted me. And they said some things that I agree with. Some of the things here are factually true, even if they're said by people that I don't like. So there you go. So we're going to scroll through some of this stuff. A year inside Kash Patel's FBI. You guys know what I think already. There is no such thing as Kash Patel's FBI, because he doesn't take over the FBI when he becomes the director. They take over him. When he returned to the office last year, President Trump called the FBI a corrupt agency in need of an overhaul. I think most of us would agree it needs much more than that. Overhaul sounds gentle. He said that he's been the subject of 3 FBI investigations, and agents that examined his 2016 campaign's alleged ties to Russia, his retention of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago after leaving office, and his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. And all 3 of those inquiries took place in part or entirely under Chris Wray. Let me pause right here. All of the people that Kash Patel has moved into leadership positions were promoted and moved into management by none other than Chris Wray. These are Chris Wray's people. They were Chris Wray's people. But that doesn't mean that it was necessarily something that Chris Wray did uniquely. What it means is, just like Kash Patel, you get captured by the agency. And what Chris Wray believed in was the FBI. And the FBI believes in the FBI. And it's this big circle jerk all around and around. If everybody believes in the thing that they're doing and nobody seems to look out and say, hey, what is the purpose of our agency? We're tasked with law enforcement. For what purpose? They don't ever consider the what purpose, which would be service outside of their actual, personal bias. I think most people don't bring that personal bias every day onto the job, but we cannot avoid the fact that the agency clearly has a bias in who agrees to be a manager, who steps up and does it, and who gets promoted when they ask to do so. There's a culture that is going to bring in certain types, and those types are the people that are quoted in this particular piece. It says to replace Wray, Trump chose Kash Patel, a former public defender and intelligence official who had never worked for the FBI and spun conspiracy theories about the Bureau. The fact of the matter that he didn't work for the FBI is not relevant. Most directors never did. He did work over at DOJ, so that's pretty common. Why they would act that, like if the new standard is you must be a former FBI employee to be the director, great. Make Steve Friend the director. That would be fine. By the way, you guys can check him out on the American Radicals podcast, which comes on after ours, or it might be accidentally overlapping because we're kind of screwed up on times for this week that we're here. He says they've interviewed 45 employees who work at the FBI or who left during Trump's second term. They don't really consider me in that category either. Beginning with Trump's selection of Patel, our sources narrated the events that troubled them the most over the last year. Many details we learned were reported here for the first time. Many details are also not relevant that they did. So I'm going to scroll down through this article because it's quite long. So then you end up, there's some pictures here. I had to grab the archive version of this, so you guys are seeing this. All right, John Sullivan, he's the former section chief of the Intel Division. Everything about that makes me uncomfortable. That means he was a senior leader as a section chief. He was in the Intel Division, which means they did the worst stuff. And the feedback I got on this from folks who were in the Bureau, my retired sort of brain trust, they said that his resume is shockingly thin, and it's incredible that he was in that job, which that's probably true. Mike Feinberg, he was the former ASAC in the Norfolk office. He's the one that was friends with Peter Strzok, and he felt like he was going to be removed. He was told he was not going to promote any further, so they quote him as well. I'm going to skip him. They have some unnamed human intelligence agent. That's somebody who recruits sources for a living. They do kind of spy-like work. They don't work on cases. He says, I wanted the White House to succeed. For 20 years, I collected information for the president's daily briefing. I listened to Kash Patel on the podcast, and the way that he viewed January 6th aligned with the FBI's rank and file. Again, this is my contention. I also said the things that we heard from Kash Patel prior to being a director was the stuff that we were hoping were going to get done. It just turns out they didn't do that. He says, quote, the agents always thought that if you assaulted police officers on that day, yes, absolutely, you should investigate and prosecute them. For the rest of them, it was a massive misuse of resources. That is a very reasonable 20-year agent saying the same thing that you've heard all of the suspendables say. I have zero problem with people who punched a cop going to prison for a little while. They also should have gone after the people that were the Antifa types that were doing that the year before. But that's not an unreasonable position for law enforcement to hold, especially if you're going to work around cops. Anyway, he said, I heard that Patel was thinking of a mass purge of the leadership and dismissing agents wholesale, and that made him concerned. Well, at the end of the day, if you have a job and you're not willing to lose it because your agency has forfeited its right, I think you got a problem. Most of my buddies that still work in the agency would be happy to lose their job if they shut down the FBI, just for whatever it's worth. Now, that's not a popular position, and certainly the GOP is not going to do it, but just so you know. They also quoted Jackie Two Mags McGuire, a former executive assistant director and the White House, saying it reversed its announcement on day one, a certain uncomfortability. I've known Brian and Rob. She's talking about people that got fired, some of the executive assistant directors as well. We've all grown up in the Bureau, and we wanted to work together. F freaking you, lady. That's the problem. She actually told you the problem. And Jackie McGuire, so you guys don't remember, she was the special agent in charge of the Philadelphia field office. She was the one that ended up shooting a dog on the street, and there's no chance that she should have been able to do that under the deadly force policy because the dog was attacking her smaller dog. You can't use your FBI gun and your government ability to carry a weapon and discharge it inside of an urban area around people because your dog's getting attacked. Could you maybe do that as a private citizen? You could. You'd have to use your own gun, and it wouldn't fall under the deadly force policy. To use it that way in the FBI is absolutely ridiculous. There are shootings that are good. There are shootings that are bad. That was clearly a dumb one. But she was an executive assistant director, so there's no chance. She was eventually an executive assistant director. At the time, she was a special agent in charge, so there's no way they were going to go after her. In any case, more John Sullivan, rather. You've got a senior executive number one. This is somebody who we don't know what their background is or who they are. Hundreds of years of an experience in one brutal swoop, talking about getting rid of human beings that work there. Made it easier to bring in their people, yes, but there are no people to bring in with that level of experience because it's so specialized. The fact is, that was what needed to happen. They needed to get rid of people that had tons of experience because their experience was in management and not working the actual work. The FBI never understood that. I always would find that the most, we've covered this probably a dozen times. If you guys listen to Steve Friend, you'll hear it as well. He always goes into the resume. It's 5-6 years of investigative experience and then all briefings from there on out. And interestingly enough, that's the people who actually snowed Bongino and Patel. They're the reasons why these guys failed and more. All right, so we're going to keep scrolling through. There's a lot of different stuff in here. A former ASAC in the Washington field office. I don't know Maria Ricci, but there's a whole thing about the news and the hit list. This would have been the sort of like the deep state and gangster type stuff. You've got a bunch of just like unnamed agents in here. There's a couple things that people called out that they thought were really, I don't know, relevant or wild. This is stuff that if you've been listening to this podcast, it's absolutely not news to you. So I'm going to go to some of that. If you guys want to see this, there will be a link in the comments. I always pin the references that I have, and it is an archived version of the New York Times. So you don't have to have a New York Times subscription to be able to read it. They actually quote, and this is actually quite funny for me, the former assistant director for intelligence. This is Tanya Ugarez, or I think that's how you know it, Ugarez. The people that I know that worked in Intel absolutely loathe this woman. So it is funny to see some of these names where you're like, that was a lady listed as one of the problems to the people that I know. She says, I was responsible for the morning intelligence briefing. Every director gets to choose how they want to receive information, how often and in what form. I did everything I could leading up to Director Patel coming on board to provide options on how those meetings would run. What type of information you want? Do you like graphics? Do you like to read? All of that. I wanted to set them up from day one to make effective decisions. They're telling you that they want to give you the information, but they're the ones who decide what the information is. And in theory, Bongino actually knew that. Did he not talk about the briefers? And I talk about Bongino in that way because he walked in there acting like he had special knowledge. Now he's walking out like he's got special knowledge. And I'm just going to tell you, it's not immediately apparent to me that he's got special knowledge of anything. There's kind of a funny moment that happened. He went on Hannity last night and talked about how he always was only going to do 1 year. I'm going to break up the reading of this long form this long form New York Times article. I want to give you the cover that's already starting to happen, the spin, if you will. It's going on right now. And look at the energy differential with Bongino coming in. He's got Hannity introducing the topic. Dan was never going to stay more than a year. Well, he didn't even stay a year. And no one ever said that. So now you're making claims of off-camera conversations that happened a year ago, but were never mentioned, were never brought up. How come that wasn't? It's like, look, I'm only got another 6 months here. I got to do this much stuff. That never happened. I think this is revisionist history, but the big thing is the energy level and the coverage that you're going to get. The man feels so much more unburdened where he's at, and all he's going to do is say a bunch of BS because he can't address the actual substance. And if you guys want just for numbers, I still have 8 times as much experience at the FBI as Dan Bongino does. I've got twice as much experience doing counterintelligence, and I have almost no experience. I basically spent 2 years doing that at the Washington field office, and then I left because it sucks. It's awful work. So this guy going out there and doing this coverage is kind of funny. Again, we'll break up this piece. I'm going to come back to it in a second. Let's do a quick little Hannity clip.
I want people to know something. You told me privately when you did go in that you were likely there for 1 year just to try and get things on track, and then you did not have a desire to stay there a long time. I want people to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to come in there. I figured it was going to take about a year to reorganize, get some accountability back, get the refocus from what they were doing. I say when I get in there were 2 FBIs, Sean. There was one that had been fully weaponized and trained to focus on all the wrong things. Then you had the other guys, the door kickers, the guys who were out there breaking up violent gangs, chasing terrorists. The thing was finding who was part of what group. So, we had to find, investigate, and then take action on a lot of this. That wasn't easy. I mean, no one comes forward and admits, hey, I was part of the weaponized prior regime. But once we got everything refocused and we had the president's directive to go forth and just get these bad guys off the street, it was go time. And when you combine that with this focus on securing the border, it shouldn't be a surprise to the American people that the violent crime rate just fell to. I saw the murder rate is the lowest it's been since 1900. It's unprecedented. I mean, by definition, there's no modern precedent for that. And we did this.
It's unprecedented, which means that there is no precedent. Amazing stuff. Great commentary. Here's the thing. I'm not sure that I trust those crime stats, and I'm not sure you should either. By the way, they've been in decline since Biden was in. That's just kind of what happens. And what we can tell, this is what I used to say at the time, and it's what Dan Bongino used to say at the time. It's pretty obvious to those of us that keep an eye on this stuff that a lot of cities are not reporting their crime. And they always revise upward after the fact, but they've removed something like a third of the major cities in the United States. So who knows how good those stats are? My guess is they're not great. Excuse me. Got me. You guys can tell. I'm not sick. I just was sitting in very loud areas trying to communicate with people about business stuff. And for some people, for some reason, they keep playing really loud music there. All right. I want to go to the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I want to go there specifically because the stuff that they're reporting in this article shocked a lot of people online. I saw a lot of movement of this story and specifically these comments. And they're acting like they didn't know this before. Listen, if you guys listen to the show, you've heard this for literally since September of 2025. Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while speaking at a university in Utah. Hours later, Kash Patel told his 1.8 million followers on X they had a suspect that's been detained. I know the person who did that interview, and there was never a reason that they should have actually announced that because that person was not a good candidate. Christian, Charlie Kirk fan, apparently Jordanian in descent, came from the Middle East. So I don't know why they thought this was the person, but wasn't it. And wasn't even close. So I'm going to scroll down to this thing where they quote a senior executive number 2. Unknown who this person is, doesn't really matter. I know that the things that are being reported in this space are accurate because I know people that were also on this call. They did a phone call where the special agent in charge of the field office in Utah got pulled in and asked to brief up Patel. And the first 20 minutes were described with the words scream crying to me. Hysterical, emotional, over the top, freaking out by Patel, knowing that his credibility was on the line because it was a big deal. And there's 2 really damning things in here that I'm confident are accurate because I've heard they count from people that were on the call. And not one, by the way. We have multiple sources that were on that call. When people talk about sources at the New York Times, they're sources. Some journalists are asking questions. When I talk about sources, they're usually people that I would regularly just call friends. But for the purposes of this broadcast, we'll call them sourcing. All right, senior executive number 2. Whenever there's a critical incident, one of the first things that happens is a conference call with everybody. All the executives, most of the field offices dial in. The director rarely speaks because someone with situational awareness is leading the call. Does that make sense? It does. If you don't know anything, you should be in the listen mode. I had a great call with Steve Baker last night, for example. I don't know what Steve was going to tell me, so I don't need to inject. I just ask questions, and then he tells me stuff, and then I ask another question, and then he goes on. Then he says whatever he wants to say. When there's a drop, I might lead him down and say, well, what about this? Because there's things that I want to know, but I'm not the expert on it. That's not what happened here. It says, quote, they say, here's what happened, here's what we know, here's what we need to know. Here's what we need to get on. But Kash Patel was just berating the special agent in charge of the Salt Lake office. He was super emotional. All of that is exactly what I heard. Again, the words scream, crying are not things that I can forget reading from the folks I was talking to. All right. It's also, he says, then it turns surreal. And this is exactly what was described to me. The second half of the phone call was this, quote, he and Bongino start talking about their Twitter strategy. And Kash is like, I'm going to tweet this. Salt Lake, you tweet this. Dan, you come in with this. And then I'll come back with this. They're literally scripting out their social media and not talking about how we're going to respond or the resources or the situation. He's screaming that he wants to put stuff out, but it's not even vetted yet. And it's not even accurate. This is the cartoon that I have been pointing out to you guys. And it's not because I'm bitter or angry at Kash Patel. At the end of the day, it's actually hysterical content for what I do. It's probably really good for what we're doing here as a podcast. It's freaking terrible for America. And as an American who wants the FBI deweaponized, it's the worst thing for me. So if you were kind of on board with what I was saying for the last couple of years, and by the way, it's been consistent. It doesn't matter who the director is. I'm not a Chris Wray fan. I wasn't a Jim Comey fan. Going back to my time at the academy, my parents will even tell you, my wife would tell you, that when we went to the academy, it's like, yeah, this guy's full of crap. He bought his own hype. They all seem to do that because there's this cult of kiss the ass of the FBI director. This guy says, when I was an agent, I did hundreds of these cases. That's probably an exaggeration, to be fair. He says, quote, the initial information that comes in is always wrong. That's probably true. There's too much coming in, and it takes time to vet. This was obvious that Cash didn't understand that, and he didn't want to understand that. And this is where it gets really weird. Every one of the calls is just like this. This guy's completely out of control. Confirmed. Completely out of control and focusing on the wrong stuff. On another call, he said, quote, when a crisis happens, the only thing you need to do is call me. The most important thing in any crisis is controlling the narrative. Does that sound like a guy that wants to do a de-weaponized law enforcement? No, that sounds like a media dipshit. Excuse my language, but that's what we're talking about. I was like, no. We have to actually do some work here. We're going to have to investigate. We're going to have to solve this. That's the purpose of the investigation. That's what it means. That's the I in FBI. This is a telling article, and this particular thing, that it caught people on the MAGA side of the coin that are now looking suspiciously at Dan Bongino and going, what the hell? That group of people, guys, this has always been the case. This is what I've been trying to tell people. And granted, we have a limited reach. We're going to continue to grow that reach. I would appreciate if you guys shared the program. In fact, I'll ask you to do that right now. Go to KyleSeraphinShow.com and do it on Spotify. You guys can follow us on YouTube. You can follow us on Rumble. You can follow us on X if you're so inclined. The X one, I'm going to start posting the links to YouTube. People were telling me that they were having a hard time getting to the monetized part of it, and we get monetized on some platforms and not on others. X doesn't give us anything for it. But more importantly, if you guys want to get the best presentation of it, go where there's a live chat if you can see it in the morning. But also, if you want to see it after the fact, check it out on Spotify. You can comment, and then I can actually see what you think, what you know, and so on and so forth. So I'll just punch that on there. KyleSeraphinShow.com is the easiest way. Locals, if you guys want to be a free member of the community there. If you want to be a paid member, you can do that too. It's relatively inexpensive, but you can share information back and forth. I can read your comments long form. People post articles and send me stuff that they want me to see behind the paywall and outside of it and so on. Anyway, that's all available to you. Either way, subscribe. That's the cheapest way you guys can support us, and I appreciate it. Give us a like wherever you're watching. That's all really helpful. And then share the program with someone that you like, that you think should learn this. Let me show you what happens when you don't engage with these people. Actually, let me just one real quick thing. Let me also do a search for my name here, because you guys will get a kick out of this maybe. Let's see, Seraphin. There we go. Okay, so Seraphin, the former agent and podcaster who previously supported Patel and posted some of his flight records on X, criticized him for flying at taxpayer expense during a government shutdown. And they ended up blaming Stephen Palmer, an agent, 27 years in the Bureau, and they got rid of him and they fired him for the bad publicity. No, it wasn't Stephen Palmer's fault. I just want to show you that I not negotiated, I just told them. I was like, look, you can call me anything you want, but at the end of the day, I'm not right-wing and I'm not far-right. And so what did? They quoted me as a former agent podcaster. That's reasonable. People can like me or not like me at the New York Times. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. They also brought up Alexis Wilkins in here and their trip to Boondoggle Ranch, which is pretty funny. The fact that she was singing the national anthem everywhere and all this kind of stuff. So all that's kind of amusing. Long and short of it is, this article was not a smash on me, even though they basically interviewed people who, generally speaking, I wouldn't agree with. And the reason is because I engaged with them in good faith. I think you can engage people you disagree with in good faith. That's my general premise. Or you can do this.
Do you dipwads even read your own headlines? Are you that stupid? These are these media morons. People who've never spent a day wearing a badge, never kicked in a door, never arrested some child predator or some bank robber or some gang member. These morons don't know anything about the safety status of the country.
Isn't that funny? Because that's the old Dan. You guys all recognize him. I don't know where he's been for the last year. He's been tucked away somewhere. But that's the old Dan, isn't it? That's how he sounds. He calls people dipwads. He's super confident. He didn't kick any doors while he was at the FBI. I just want to disabuse everybody of that misnomer. Dan Bongino, as the deputy director of the FBI, kicked 0 doors in. He got briefed on everything, though. The thing that he used to warn is how they capture you. The briefers. Go back and pull old Dan Bongino clips about the briefers. That's where he got his information. And then he worried about his Twitter account and his social media following. And he worried about whether or not he was going to have any credibility. I'm going to do a quick change. That was on Sean Hannity's show. That wasn't the Dan Bongino podcast, even though it sounded exactly like the Dan Bongino show that you guys used to know. Some of you used to know. It's stark contrast because this is in December. This is 1 month ago. This was the different version. This was before he was. This is when he was paid for the facts. Now he's back to doing his opinion thing. I just want you to listen to the energy differential.
You know, I don't know if you remember this. This is before you became the deputy FBI director. You put a post on X right after this happened, and you said there's a massive cover-up because the person that planted those pipe bombs, they don't want you to know who it is because it's either a connected anti-Trump insider or an inside job. You said that, you know, long before you were even thought of as deputy FBI director.
Yeah, that's why I said to you, this investigation's just begun. We are pretty comfortable. We have our guy. I think as again, legal process starts to surface and information, facts start to come out, the public's going to be very comfortable with the investigation that was conducted under Director Patel and his leadership. He's been great on this.
Do you dipwads even read your own headlines? Are you that stupid? These are these media morons. People who've never spent a day wearing a badge, never kicked in a door, never arrested some.
Isn't that funny? I'm just saying, I wanted you to see a one-to-one. I had to set up those clips so you could get them back to back. That's a little different, isn't it? That's not how Dan Bongino normally sounds. His last 9, 10, 12 months, whatever it was, where he was away, I guess it's 9 months plus some change. Yeah, that's not how he sounded at all. Anyhow, just the confidence is back. It's nice to hear that we're going to get the BS and the braggadocious nonsense that's not accurate. And again, he got it all from briefers, the people he used to rail against. I think that's fascinating to me. It's always fun when people go and eat themselves alive. And I've got a fun clip from Tucker talking to Alex Clark. I think she's with Turning Point now, but Alex Clark and Tucker are having this conversation back in July of last year when they released the Epstein memo saying that there were no additional prosecutions coming. And Tucker had some great commentary on it. It's quite fascinating to me that he was threatening to resign a couple of days in, right? He joined in March, so April, May, June, July. He was 4 months into his tenure there, and he was already talking about walking out the door. But somehow he knew that was going to look worse than walking out at 9 or 10 months, where he could round it up to a year. Very fascinating. Just only because I'm not trying to be a jerk about it per se, but he didn't do very nice things. I had a funny conversation on the floor the other day at SHOT Show where somebody said, Dan Bongino's my friend. And I was like, cool. Well, if he stabs you in the back, then he won't be. Let's do a quick break over here. Remind you, there's actually a bunch of stories on the main pages, which I'm not going to cover, about weather. And this might be one of those moments where it's probably almost too late, but if you guys can get it done, you might want to do it, or it might just prompt you into thinking about brutal cold weather coming when you're not used to it. I'm looking at you, Texas, right now. The South and even pieces in the Northeast are getting hammered by some pretty aggressive winter, and it's been a pretty mild winter other than that. If you're worried about that and you realize, what am I going to do if the power goes out? How do I keep my family warm? How can I cook if we don't have access to electric and I'm on an electric stove? You might want to check out the Vesta off-grid heater. This is from my folks over at My Patriot Supply, mypatriotsupply.com/Kyle. Again, mypatriotsupply.com/Kyle. Link in the show description. It's a space heater. Doesn't use electricity, so you'll survive on that. It doesn't require propane, so you can burn it indoors. It runs on canned heat, which is kind of like what we used to use in the military. We had sternos. This is something I used in survival school, to be fair. You can keep it in your closet. You stash it away. You've got access to it. It doubles as a cook stove, so you can keep your food hot. Nobody wants to eat cold food when you're freezing your butt off in your home. And as someone who has had HVAC go out in the middle of the winter and been in 20 degrees indoors, it sucks. It's like living on an Indian reservation, actually. It's not very good. In any case, right now, you can get the Vesta space heater and you can get a bunch of other preparedness gear as free gifts when you order the winter survival kit. You're seeing that on the screen. There's a scan you guys can use to get access to it for a limited time right now. You're going to get their deal. Check it out. The Vesta space heater, the canned heat, the options. Hopefully it's not too late for wherever you are. Hopefully you guys don't lose power. You won't be able to watch our podcast, so I guess you won't be hearing this either. But check that out. And if you guys are using that as a reminder that bad things happen sometimes in your area where you are, then maybe that's what you want to check into. Link in the show description, mypatriotsupply.com/Kyle. All right, let's go to this interesting little story about the love affair of Alexis Wilkins, girlfriend of Kash Patel. There's nothing worse than when you're not even your own person in the media stories that are written about you. At least when they talk about Kyle, they talk about me in a mean way. They might call me far right or whatever, but at least they refer to me as who I am. They don't say that, like, I'm Emily's husband or like I'm Charlie's kid or something like that. I just think it's really funny that, like, no matter what she does, she's not a person in and of herself to the media. Okay. She's obviously a person. But the media only covers her in so much as she's Kash Patel's girlfriend. So that's kind of funny. And that means it comes with all the baggage that goes along with it. This is a Vanity Fair piece. I'll let you know they reached out to per comment to me. I cannot fathom that Vanity Fair matters in my world. So I didn't respond back, and I was kind of busy at the time. So they did this without my quotation. I probably would have given them some more context if I think about it. FBI jets, her own security detail, and honky tonk love. Alexis Wilkins talks to life as Kash Patel's girlfriend. What a funny, silly thing. We had a beautiful Christmas with family, she says. I can't do an Alexis Wilkins voice. It was wonderful and normal. Oh, I didn't even grab the whole story down here. Sorry. So this is behind a paywall. Guys, I'll grab it for you when I go downstairs. I'll just tell you, I read the story yesterday, and it's pretty amusing in so much as they go into her background history, that she was born in Boston, that she grew up in a posh boarding school in Switzerland. It's apparently the same place that Tucker Carlson went. I'm going to play a clip from him in a second, just for commentary's sake. She went to a very unnormal, non-natural, not country upbringing. And then she moved to Arkansas. She moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas. And as I've told you guys, at the age of like 9 or 10, when she got there, she apparently immediately started going to Hollywood to become an actress. So for this country girl, there's pictures of her. You guys can search it yourself. Alexis Wilkins, type in Getty Images, Getty. I don't know why you guys are going to do this, but some of you will. Getty Images. Go check them out. I've shown some here. There's 175, 173 images of her showing up at places that are what I'll call industry events. You guys know I used to work in Hollywood. Maybe you don't know that. I was a finance guy for Warner Brothers for about a year and a half before I joined the military. And these industry events are places where people go to meet other people inside the movie industry, inside like the music industry. But most of the stuff she was doing was like actress type photo shoots. So she's posing, there's red carpets. Her family had to take her out there on the regular basis. She had anything but a low key country upbringing. And so I think that's really funny. She showed up in a sci-fi movie at one point as a victim when she was a little girl. She was on some episodes from Disney and some Disney Channel stuff, pictures of her in cheerleading outfits and stuff like that, sitting at like, I don't know, diners in some show that I didn't watch, definitely after my time. Alexis Wilkins was doing her best to be an actress. She was on Modern Family, at least one episode. I've got pictures of her sitting with the guy that played Al Bundy. Nothing against any of those people. And there's nothing wrong with being an actress. It's just interesting that you're presenting yourself as this like country girl, and you're all rhinestones, bedazzled, and fake camouflage, and your whole big cause is that you're interested in helping veterans. You're not a veteran. Your dad's not a veteran, and you went to freaking posh boarding schools overseas. You're like the opposite of the people that I served with in the military. All of them. Like none of them would have been anything like you. And they didn't go out there and try to be Hollywood figures. And then when it didn't work out, their backup plan was that they were a singer. Also, all the early singing that we have. And we have some videos of her. I've got videos of her going back to being like 12, 15, 16 years old, which is kind of creepy. I just did background research when I got sued by this girl. And interestingly enough, all the stuff that she was singing in the talent shows and stuff like that all around LA, yeah, they had nothing to do with country. She was doing Drops of Jupiter, and she was singing like pop songs that were common and hits. And you can do that. I'm just saying, don't say that you're a big country fan and that's all you did when you weren't singing those songs when you were trying to make it on the scene in Hollywood. You were singing the songs that were getting the most listens right then. They weren't necessarily country songs, especially not in California. So I don't know if she lived in LA or if they had a place in LA or if they just traveled there frequently enough that there are pictures of her multiple times a year at these industry events. But I just want you to think, when you were 12 years old, was there a place that you went 3 times a year, 5 times a year to go show up for like potential jobs? As a 12-year-old, if you've never been around these people, they're a real different breed. The industry type folks that are trying to push you into, being an actor. It's the moms that drag their kid, put them in the line, run them through all these different auditions until they get something, and then they get some bit part or like they get into a commercial somewhere. They're a real specific type of group. So anyway, all of that. I found it kind of interesting watching it. I just went like, okay, cool. Other people are now picking up on the story. She's not exactly the lady she presents herself to be in the world. And I think that's relevant in so much as everybody kind of has this sense there's a little bit off about her. And it could just be that she's trying to be more country than she is, and that's what she's projecting. And so that's what's making it seem like she's doing something else. They talk about, of course, the all the allegations that happened online, and they have not stopped, and nobody has changed their mind because the way she behaves is not exactly what anyone thinks. And I don't know anyone that sings the national anthem for a living, and probably neither do you. And nobody can name any of her songs. She's a country music sensation that no one's ever heard of in the country music world. Listen, I listen to country music for whatever it's worth. I've got stations, I've got Pandora stations. Never once have I heard her. Similar name, different person. Alex Clark. I told you guys that Tucker Carlson said something about this kind of crew. This is all like this weird, like little, this parasocial media orbit that exists. That's the FBI director's girlfriend, and so she's got profiles in Vanity Fair. It's the former podcaster Dan Bongino who shows up on media and talks big and tough one way or another, and now he's going back. It's Kash Patel, who said a bunch of stuff and wrote a book and was like this MAGA figure, but now he's like really disappointing to people that are in that space. Like all these people, they're famous for things that are not doing the job that they're hired for. Tucker Carlson, another person who's famous for doing the thing that Tucker Carlson does, which is talk about it and do media and commentary. And he's talking about this thing that I think is relevant going back to July of 2025, which was that there were threats they were going to leave. All this stuff came down to credibility, Epstein files. It's the stuff that Dan Bongino is going to have to run away from at his podcast. I just want you to listen to this from like 7-8 months ago. He was threatening early on. He wasn't feeling super cocky and doing media then. And here's someone who claims to be his friend talking about it. Having on pretty good authority that Bongino was called and bitched out Tucker because he doesn't like anything that's potentially even a little bit negative or might besmirch his brand.
Well, as we're recording this, Dan Bongino is threatening to resign if Pam Bondi does not resign as AG. What does that tell us, in your opinion? Well, it tells us that Dan Bongino got shafted, completely shafted. And I'm saying this as a friend of his and someone who respects and likes him, but also just as an observer, an informed observer of it. So Pam Bondi, who's, by the way, I don't hate Pam Bondi. She's a totally nice person. If she was here, you would enjoy, I don't know if you know her, but she's a very nice person. I'm not against Pam Bondi in the slightest. But the fact is she got on television on Fox News and started saying stuff like, I've got the client list on my desk. And actually, no, you don't. And I've got thousands of videos of Epstein having sex with kids. Well, actually, no, you don't. Most of the material was commercial porn taken off his computer. Like, that's just not true. Why did she say that? Probably because she's insecure and she's trying to please the audience, I would expect. Do you think Dan is upset because his integrity is being questioned now over her mistakes? Oh, my gosh. So you're Dan and you're a media figure and you've got one of the biggest podcasts in the country and you're making tons of money and you're having a great time, which he was. You just built this brand new studio in Florida. You work with your wife, who you really like, which she does. And you get the call saying you'd be deputy FBI director. And you're like, I love Donald Trump. I love this country. I will, cut my pay by, into a tenth of what it was. And I will leave my house and move to D.C., which is a kind of prison sentence itself. And I will.
Do you dipwads even read your own headlines? Are you that stupid? These are these media morons. People who've never spent a day wearing a badge, never kicked in a door, never arrested some child predator or some bank robber or some gang member. These morons don't.
These morons. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of fun. And since Pam Bondi was brought up, let's do some Pam Bondi. How about a Fox News exclusive sit down letting you know? Be on notice. Be on notice. Thank God they took some action this week, okay? It wasn't tremendous action. I'm going to explain it in a bit. We'll spend the second half of the show talking about that. But they did take some action. But here she is promising things because that's what Pam Bondi does. She goes on Fox and she promises things kind of like Patel goes on Fox and promises things kind of like Bongino went on Fox and promised things. I think people should be held accountable for their words. If you say you're going to do something, I'd like you to do it. If you're not going to do it, then we should say, hey, didn't you tell us you were going to do that? That's not unreasonable. Americans should get that. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle, by the way. Here's a little taste of this Fox exclusive.
There's a database that's out right now involving people putting ICE agents' license plates and other information out there in the public. It's here in Minnesota, it's in other cities. Can those people expect to face federal charges?
They better look out, because you cannot dox, law enforcement's information is private, and you wonder, why are our ICE officers wearing masks? To protect themselves from these people. We are going to do everything legally we can do to keep our men and women in law enforcement safe and the citizens of this state safe, so they can go to church, they can go to school, they can go to work, and they can feel safe. Minnesota has been a war zone with criminals, no longer under the Donald Trump administration.
Have you noticed that vocal pattern since I pointed it out to you? If you guys listen to this podcast for a little while, you'll notice I think she does female, like slightly lower energy WWE style things. And they breathe at awkward times. She always breathes at a time when you don't expect her to breathe. And that's why, and she stops in the middle of a sentence and tells you something. And then it's all cartoon and theater. And it's bad acting. It's bad overacting. J.D. Vance is much more honest about the way that he presents his information. Whether he's honest or not, I don't know, but it sounds more honest to me when I listen to it. And so maybe a little bit more of that, a little bit less of Bondi, a little bit better or less of watch out. And for whatever it's worth, your information is not private. It's not private. You sign a mortgage, it's public like everybody else. You may be able to get it redacted from the records, but your tax records, those are public. I used to find people, including FBI agents. You want to know a great way to be able to find out if an FBI agent looks somewhere? Look up their address and find out that their name is redacted from the tax record. That's not common. So, in any case, J.D. Vance says that Minneapolis would be less chaotic if local officials would cooperate more with ICE. Fact check true. That's 100% the case. This was an interview where he was talking about the Insurrection Act and whether it's needed to be done. And it probably does need to be done. Not necessarily for local law enforcement, because local law enforcement is shirking the thing that they have, which is a duty to the public to do protection. I told you guys before, I don't care if the people in Minnesota, if the state law enforcement officials, or if the police chief in Minneapolis does not want to help ICE. That's totally fine. They're not required to. That's a local priority, and people will vote what they want. They'll put in the mayor they want that's going to give them the police chief and the policies they want. But if you're allowing people who otherwise would be blocked from a street to get right in the middle of a federal operation, you are asking for people to get shot. You are asking for people to get arrested for obstruction. You are really creating a dangerous situation that's unnecessary. And as someone who's been on a lot of federal operations, I don't kick a ton of doors, but probably more than Dan Bongino could have imagined while he was in the FBI. When we were doing that, you always had a local cop that would go and block the ends of the streets off. And the reason they do it is not because they're involved in your operation. They were rarely read in on the plan. They knew where they needed to be to turn the lights and sirens on. They would, do a knock and announce. They'd throw some flashies out so that when people looked out the window, they'd see a marked cop car. They'd see an FBI, Bearcat or whatever it was that was going on. They might see a bunch of unmarked cars with law enforcement lighting. But you do that to let people know ongoing federal operation, stay the hell out. And there's someone there who's wearing a uniform that they recognize, that they normally pay for, that is saying, halt, don't go in there. That's a place where you're going to go get shot because they're doing something that's dangerous. It's to protect the public. And when you're going into these houses, you're wearing body armor and rifles and handguns and so on, because the possibility is there's going to be violence. Nobody wants the public involved in that. That's what they're supposed to be doing. He's saying they should cooperate, and the answer is yes, but not necessarily because they agree, but because they want to protect the population that's there. J.D. Vance conceded Thursday that federal law enforcement officers have not been perfect in handling the immigration enforcement. Of course they haven't been perfect. They're humans. He visited the city. His main message was the best way to reduce clashes around ICE operations would be for Democrats to cooperate with the Trump agenda. I don't think that's the winning messaging. Protect your own population. Cooperate with your own people so they don't get shot in the face for trying to run over an ICE agent or for trying to escape, which they're not allowed to do. So I like to find the ground. It's not center ground. It's the reasonable ground that says, do what's in your own best interests. Please. Do what's in your own best interests, and it's also in the best interest of the public. It turns out it might be advantageous for the federal law enforcement, but not for its own sake. It's because you're doing the job that you're required to do. Tensions peaked after a federal officer, I think he was an agent to be fair, fatally shot Nicole Good, 37, in a confrontation on January the 7th, and then Trump and Vance and the other officials, without offering conclusive evidence, which they do not owe the news media at this point, said Good was connected to a left-wing protester group, which it sounds like she probably was, and a threat to officers as they approached her car and she began to drive. All of those things are irrelevant. None of those things are the facts. All we need to know is, did the officer who did the shooting have a reasonable and articulated belief that she posed an imminent danger of death or serious physical injury to the officer or to his partner, or to another person somewhere else? That's it. These people always miss the part. Let's do a J.D. Vance little discussion. This is what he said about the Insurrection Act, which was what he was asked about. Fox News clip of him saying, again, he's a way better actor. If he's an actor, he sounds far more genuine than someone like Pam Bondi. So I'm more inclined to listen to him and go, yeah, that sounds right.
Or any other administration.
Was there anything that you heard or saw today that would cause you to counsel the president to invoke the Insurrection Act? And then also, did you meet or talk to the ICE agent who was involved in the Renee Good incident?
I did not talk to him today. I talked to some of his colleagues. Your question on the Insurrection Act is interesting. I've tried to understand this as well as I possibly could. And my understanding is what the Insurrection Act, what invoking the Insurrection Act would allow the federal government to do is that it would allow the federal government to use the military for local law enforcement operations. Right now, we don't think that we need that. Now, the president could change his mind. Of course, things could get worse. But right now, we think that federal law enforcement officers can do the job of federal law enforcement. Now, what I do worry about, again,
they could do the job of federal law enforcement, but they still require a security perimeter, and they don't probably have the personnel for it, and oftentimes they don't have the uniform, the kit, the vehicles, and so on. And so if that's the case, if you can't get local law enforcement to do the job of local law enforcement, he might be wrong on that, to be fair. He might need these guys not to do the enforcement actions, but to do the security perimeter actions. I think that's something that they have to discuss. Whether they need to actually do the Insurrection Act to do that or not is another animal. It really is. So there's a little bit of a nuance there. Let's go to Reuters. Let's go to this story here. This is sort of the lead story of the day. I think it's relevant. Let's go do a couple minutes on it for sure. 3 people arrested in Minnesota church protest. You guys have been following this with me, I'm sure. This is a guy named William Kelly. There's a woman whose name is like some silly Nemia or something like that. I'll read it for you in a second. She has like kind of a frustrating name. Here, I'll get it for you right there. Nikema. Yeah, that's not a real name. Nikema Levy Armstrong was arrested, as well as someone called, I'm just going to wing this one, Chantali. It's Chaunt, Shanti. There's a Y and then 2 L's. Shanti, whatever, Louisa Allen. The one guy who was also arrested is this guy, William Kelly. So we're going to hear from him. He's that loudmouth dude with the beard, a U.S. Army veteran. Unclear what his background is. And here's what's kind of funny. I know that if he was on the right, they would have vetted his background already. But he's saying things that they like. The fact of the matter is they arrested 3 people who were organizers of this. Why they arrested them, though, is actually kind of interesting. We pointed out that there should be an arrest for what's called the FACE Act. And the FACE Act is the Free Access to Clinic Entrances Act. It falls underneath USC. It's 18 USC 248. Okay, and I'm going to actually put that on the screen as well. So there you go. 248, freedom of access to clinic entrances. I pointed out to you that I believe that they've actually violated 248 Section A, and then go down here to Part 2. By force or threat of force, physical obstruction, intentional injuries, intimidates or interferes with, right? Okay, are we not there? Attempts to injure, intimidate, interfere with any person lawfully exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at that place of worship. So 248 is the statute that I think is of relevance. That's not what they actually ended up getting the charge for in the complaint. So we'll go through what that means in just a second here. 18 U.S.C. 241, conspiracy against rights was the one that actually got the arrest done. And let me show you. It took some digging. And there's some misinformation out there on the Twitter sphere, on Facebook, on some of the other social medias you guys may be looking at. So allow me to elucidate that one here. This is the arrest warrant, which was done by complaint as far as I can tell. The arrest warrant has 2 pieces that they were going to charge. They listed 241, the conspiracy against rights charge, and 248, as I said, A2. Oh. Seraphin, you called it right out. Now, the judge in Minnesota did not agree. Also didn't sign off on an arrest of Don Lemon. I think that's relevant and interesting. I'm not sure how conspiracy against rights was the one that they chose to do, and we'll go back to that real quickly so you guys can read the statute along with me. If any 2 or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, intimidate any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his having so exercised the same, if 2 or more persons go in disguise on a highway, they go through a whole thing. If you block someone from exercising their rights, theoretically, that is a conspiracy against rights, and that's 18 U.S.C. 241. That's where the arrest warrant came in. That is not the FACE Act violation that it should be. The FACE Act seems like a freaking layup. Again, they charged it exactly as I said I think they should, 248A2. But that actually, you have a cross out here. And if you guys are looking on the screen, you can see it. Again, if you're listening and you're not on Spotify, check out Spotify so you can get the video. No probable cause. It's scratched out. And the judge initialed it. So only gave them one of the two charges. All right. The woman who was arrested, this Nikema Levy Armstrong, had some strong words. She's sad because people don't like her and said mean things about her. Welcome to the media situation, sister. This is how it works. Sometimes people don't like you and they send you mean and nasty stuff. I was showing some people some of the nasty stuff people say to me, including on Facebook, which is really weird. A lot of folks who look like me, dads, husbands, veterans, they'll send me horrible stuff because they have some other freaking hero that they love. This lady's experiencing a little bit of it, and she's not so happy.
Dumb bitch. So that's what someone wrote to me. And again, it's one of many emails that I have received from these MAGA supporters, from people who have a problem with the fact that we came into the church to confront an injustice, and do not have a problem with the fact that you have an ICE director, not just an ICE agent, as some people have said, but the director of the ICE field office in the state of Minnesota, also serving as a pastor at City's Church in St. Paul.
I don't know who set you up as the arbiter of what is and what is not allowed, but I'm pretty sure you're allowed to freely exercise your religion, even if you're an ICE director and people don't like that about you. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. What's none of your damn business? You don't get to go stomp into a church and run around and do that any more than I can go to your house and say, I don't like civil rights attorneys. I'm going to go march around with a bullhorn and scream at your family while they're trying to have their breakfast cereal. Like, I can't do that, and neither can you. Like, what the hell are these people thinking? Anyway, Don Lemon was not arrested, and so that's interesting. And so Don Lemon decided to make himself a little diva martyr, and he said he's going to challenge. He sounds just like Pam Bondi. And by the way, I think he actually is probably provably guilty of these things. So we'll see. I'll take the journalist exception only under the situation that we agree that there were a bunch of journalists that were improperly charged for January 6th. Is the left going to do that? Do they defend my friend Steve Baker or J.D. Rivera or Stephen Horn or Owen Schroyer? I can name off at least 4 off the top of my head of people that I personally know, that I talk to on a semi-frequent basis. Really? You guys are going to talk about journalists now? That's what it's all about? That's what the judge apparently rejected this on. Here's where the bad information came in. And I want you guys to at least be aware of it because it is out on social media. The claim is that Judge Zia Farouk, from the January 6 cases in Washington, D.C., was the person who actually disagreed with the criminal complaint against Don Lemon. As far as I can tell, that is not accurate, but it is being widely reported on right-wing media. Again, another reason why we have to check our sources. There's also some claims that this guy, William Kelly, had a dishonorable or a bad conduct discharge from the Army, that he was an intel troop, that he's not the person he says he was, potentially a stolen valor scenario. All of that also may be true, but I can't validate it, so I'm still waiting on that. I want you to know that it's out there. I'm going to show you where it's being reported. Take some of this stuff with a grain of salt. Don't necessarily immediately take it and said, someone said something bad about someone I don't like. It must be true. It's the same reason why I'm willing to negotiate with the New York Times. I'm not crazy about being smeared as far right when in fact, I don't know what the hell that means. I don't know if that guy has that setup. I do know that Don Lemon is a diva. I do know that Don Lemon is not nearly as important as he'd like to be. And I do know that this is throwing fuel on the fire for whatever he does in his podcast. So here he is saying, come at me if you want. This is one where he really should be humbled if they're going to do the thing. If we're going to hold it to the same standard that the previous administration did, then he 100% was involved in this as an activist. You can be an activist journalist. You just can't do it and break the law.
Look, I stand proud and I stand tall. This is not a victory lap for me because it's not over. They're going to try again and they're going to try again. And guess what? Here I am. Keep trying. That's not going to stop me from being a journalist. You're not going to diminish my voice. Go ahead, make me into the new Jimmy Kimmel if you want. Because I'm not going anywhere and I'm going to believe the same things, whether you want to, whatever. None of this is about justice.
Okay, dude. Sure. I mean, I agree with you. None of it's about justice. It's about the performance. It's about the virtue signal. It's about all those things. And I like that he says, make me the new Jimmy Kimmel. You make you a new comedian. You're not funny. I mean, neither is Jimmy Kimmel for that matter. And Jimmy Kimmel's not a journalist, right? But we've just stretched all these definitions to mean whatever the hell it is. He's an activist. You can do activism all you want. You can do it behind the microphone. I do it here. I'm an activist. I'm an activist for government transparency. I want people to do what they're supposed to do. Doesn't mean you can break the law. And that's why you don't break the law. That would be the right way to go about things. All right. Just a little bit on process. They filed these things, it looks like, with a criminal complaint. Criminal complaint means that an FBI agent or any other sort of federal law enforcement agent in the federal system will swear out what's called an affidavit. It's going to be the statement of probable cause, says that we have probable cause to believe that a federal crime was committed and that this person committed that crime. In this case, it was 241, which is going to be that conspiracy against rights, and 248, which is the FACE Act. Great. You bring it to the judge. Almost always the judge just signs off on it. They were extra full of scrutiny on this one because this was one of those things that it probably hit near and dear to this judge's heart. Well, they're not supposed to look at it that way. But oftentimes you'll get the FBI getting these complaints when they probably shouldn't. So I guess it's good that we've got a judge that's willing to review it and say you don't meet the pattern of facts necessary. That doesn't mean it's over. They can take that 248 charge, the one that didn't go on, the FACE Act, and they can put it in front of a grand jury. Then they probably will have to do this anyway. They put it in front of the grand jury, and so maybe they got the complaint on 241, you got arrested, now you've been processed. In the federal system, once you've been arrested, you get taken in front of a judge. It's called the initial appearance, and then after the initial appearance, they read you the charges. Sometimes you get a chance to plea if they've gone to grand jury. Sometimes they don't. Kind of depends on how it works out. It's doing it differently in Brian Cole Jr.'s case in D.C., so people are saying that as well. There can be a preliminary hearing where they discuss probable cause if they don't take it in front of a grand jury in the minimum amount of time. Usually that's 14 days. Sometimes there's an extension to 30 days. There can be an agreement by the defense counsel to extend it beyond that if they so agree. So there's all these little kind of flexibilities under the speedy trial rules. But as you are going out there, there are multiple things that need to happen. The complaint just means we get you into custody. You need a statement of probable cause, which either comes from a preliminary hearing or afterwards you could do instead a grand jury, which is what DOJ will always try to do. And the grand jury means they present this information and they can present more. So they can get an indictment for more than the original charge. What they wanted to do is show an arrest. They showed the flag. They showed that DOJ is willing to go take people into custody. Good for them. Let's call it where it is. Good. They should. They should be discouraged. The violation of churches should be discouraged. So 2 points to Harmeet Dillon, 2 points to Pam Bondi for doing the thing they're supposed to do. I'm certainly not mad at them for doing that. Here's the guy that also got arrested, William Kelly. Again, weird information about that guy. Whether or not it's accurate is a little bit in debate, but I want to show you what it looks like. Sorry there, that was him screaming, so we'll get that in a second. This is the sort of social media post. This is the information from these social media posts. He's known as DeWoke Farmer. I don't know if the dude's a farmer at all. I don't know what he farms, but that's his handle, okay? He got booted from the Army with a bad conduct discharge is the reporting here. I can't substantiate that, but I've seen it on Reddit. I've seen it on Facebook. I've seen it on X. It may or may not be accurate. They claim that he was in the Army for 4 years. This was an enlistment from 2007 to 2011. His stories don't add up as a combat infantry veteran. That's the claim. No deployment to Afghanistan. He wasn't a warrant officer, and apparently he's made those claims that he was. Apparently he was an admin troop. This is the claim. MOS 42 Alpha, zero combat overseas. And in 2008, he was court-martialed, which led to a drop to private, and apparently got an other than honorable discharge, what's known as a bad conduct discharge, or a BCD. Again, that stuff is unsubstantiated. It is regularly reported on social media by a lot of people and very big. I think this one here that we're looking at has 500,000 views. So literally millions of people have seen these because I've seen other posts of similar sort of similar distribution. I don't know if it's true or not. You don't know if it's true or not. Be aware that it might be true. Be aware that it might be false. He may be exactly who he says he is. He certainly seems like an unhinged kind of jerk. Here he is screaming about stuff. This is from MAGA Cult Slayer, which is one of the very aggressive left-wing sort of propaganda outlets that I follow on X, because I like to know when people are saying things that I don't agree with. Again, how else are you going to be able to combat them if you don't know what it is?
ICE is the complete opposite of Christianity. You cannot be an ICE agent and be a pastor. My name is William Kelly. I'm a combat infantry veteran. I'm a patriot. I'm a defender of human dignity. But we went in there and we preached the words of Jesus at them. Jesus said to love thy neighbor. Jesus said to welcome aliens from faraway places. But we're terrorists? They're calling me a professional agitator now? Well, yes, I am. I am an agitator because people need to be agitated. What they're doing to this nation.
It turns out a quote-unquote professional agitator, and you need to be agitated. You can't do that in places in violation of federal law. So the 241 charge is the only one that stuck so far. I think 248 would stand in front of a grand jury and regular people. Makes me think the judge was a little bit biased. Whatever. We'll find out soon enough if they decide to take this, indict it, and if they try to get some more indictments on there. And I think, honestly, I don't think it's very hard. He's done it I would just show videos of him side by side saying things and then doing things. It's pretty clear that he did it to me. Again, I'm not on that grand jury in Minnesota. Here he is screaming about other things, fascism and other things, about how riled up he is. He's talking about Nikema, who got arrested as well, the woman who said something about being a B word. And here he is wearing his F Trump hat. Way to go, guy. Way to look totally reasonable. I'm sure this is not going to be hurting you at trial.
They've just arrested Nikema Armstrong for our protest on Sunday. You know, my lawyers tell me they have no fucking case. This use of the FACE Act and the KKK Act is complete bullshit. But let's be honest, they don't fucking care. They don't believe in the rule of law. They're fascists. They're now going after fucking the Clintons for the Epstein files? What the fuck? God damn it, people. When will you stop fucking acting like everything's normal and going about your fucking days? Get in the fucking streets now. It's time to shut this country down. We are at fascism. The republic has fucking fallen. Please, Americans, please stand up for something. Do not be the same as those in 1930s Germany. Because right now, that's exactly what you're all fucking doing. Please wake the fuck up.
You know what's funny is when someone tells me about 1930s Germany, I didn't see that guy when the COVID shots were being thrust on people and nobody wanted them. And maybe you didn't either. Isn't that fun? It's like it's selective outrage about certain things that don't have anything to do with the real fascism. You know, like medical experimentation on people that don't want to have anything to do with it. That would have been a nice thing for that guy step up. I would have agreed with him then, and we could have had some common ground. And maybe he was out there screaming about it. I just didn't see him getting promoted in that way. So, oh well, just things that I see of inconsistencies. And for your awareness, the Newsweek did a story about him, and what I found quite interesting is that they only reported what he reported about himself. And they didn't dig any further, and they asked the Army for comment. And so I found that to be fascinating. Isn't it something that we should have looked into? Like, who the hell is this guy? And like, why is he like this? Bondi posted about him being in custody, and that's fine. I actually think I have that over here too. There you go. Minutes ago. I found out about this, by the way, while we were uploading yesterday's podcast. I knew this was the case. I heard that apparently this woman, Nikema Levy Armstrong, hired armed guards to try to protect her at the hotel she was staying in, and it didn't work because it turns out federal agents don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. This guy, Kelly, interestingly enough, he's out here making these claims and about who he is. And again, there's a lot of folks posting alternative information. Whether or not it's accurate is hard to say, but I found out that the news stories did not, in fact, go out and validate his background. And that's very unusual. I'm going to read it here. I'm looking for it in the piece. You can see it takes all the way to the bottom. It says, Kelly, who said he previously served in the Army from 2007 to 2011, vowed to continue protesting. There's nothing else there about him. I've never seen somebody not discredited. They reached out to the Department of Justice and the Army for comment on Tuesday, and then they don't actually reference it again. And so they didn't find out anything about him, apparently. And the Army didn't give him any comment, so they just ignored it. They just said, we asked for comment, we got nothing. I found that fascinating. Again, the guy that's calling about tyranny, that's calling about fascism, where was he when the other stuff was going on that was clearly fascistic in this country, where the federal government was shoving things down the throat of private industry and making you at your job in healthcare, you at your job, that had more than 100 people working for you, where OSHA was required to go out and do something like stuff things up your nose or make sure that you were getting those shots? Where the hell was he then? Interestingly enough, COVID continues to just keep trickling out there in the world. And here's one last little thought about that. This is the former CDC director who left a couple days after Operation Warp Speed produced the shot.
The problem is not the science of creating the vaccine. The problem was the public policy and how to use the vaccine. The vaccine should have never been mandated. It wasn't never meant to prevent transmission. It didn't prevent transmission. Probably was a misnomer to call it a vaccine. It's really more like a medicine. It doesn't stop infection. Children should have never been vaccinated. People shouldn't have been mandated to be vaccinated to go to school and work. So the policy side was totally misplayed, okay? And I know the vaccine came out on the 14th of December, and I was out of office on January 20th, so unfortunately I had very little influence on the policy. But I did argue that it should be a vaccine that we should use for the vulnerable. Put it in the nursing homes, put it in assisted living. Don't mandate this vaccine. Didn't belong in children. So a lot of overreach, and as a consequence,
a lot of overreach. The overreach that we would probably call fascistic. Mm-hmm. For those of us that lived it, for those of us that remember what that looked like, for those of us who just want to be left alone so we can have our bacon cheeseburger, it was kind of a big deal. It was life-changing. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of this microphone but for that thing that they did. And he can't help calling it a vaccine. even though he's just said in his own words, it wasn't a vaccine. It was never meant to stop transmission. Yeah, we know. I mean, some of us know, and we recognized it at the time, right? I mean, how many of us were screaming about that? In fact, the time that the FBI actually removed me from federal service, or many of you got removed from the military or your jobs, it was already obvious that it didn't work. It didn't stop transmission. And most of us had already had COVID at that point. So that 1930s Germany reference always kind of gets me going. Luckily, we have serious people like Donald Trump in the White House. Somebody referred to me as a TDS sufferer. I don't, but I think Donald Trump says some dumb things. And this is the one dumb thing that really drives me nuts. He always goes after freaking Tom Massey. So we're going to close with these thoughts. Don't go after Tom Massey when he's doing the freaking thing that he was elected to go do. Don't do that. Tom Massey just voted no, and with Democrats. And I even saw people that I generally respect and like their opinion on, people like Kurt Schlichter was writing about this. He said Tom Massey might as well be a Democrat. Massey didn't want to do another one of these minibus bills that gave $5 billion to help like illegal aliens and their welfare programs. The guy always votes against government waste. In the same way that many of us would be happy to have an entire Supreme Court of Clarence Thomases, the most thoughtful, conservative, actually principled person on the court, as far as I can tell, I would 100% be fine with all Clarence Thomas or Clarence Thomas types on the Supreme Court. I would dream of a Congress full of people as smart and capable as Tom Massey. So for those of you guys that listen to Donald Trump and you think, oh, well, Tom, everything he says is great, he's wrong. And Massey is objectively and so far beyond the intelligence of Donald Trump. Every time, like 10 times out of 10. That's not me kissing Tom Massey's ass. That's a thing that Donald Trump could have never done half the things that the guy did. And if you guys talk to people in the sort of libertarian world, or you talk to people that are just regular Americans that love freedom, almost everybody that I've seen here at the SHOT Show, they all love Tom Massey. He's their favorite too. It's kind of funny. These are my people. Anyway, here's Donald Trump saying something about how he needs to get his head checked and he hates him, calls him a loser. This is your guy sometimes.
The reconciliation plan, do you want that?
I'd like to see it. It's hard when you have a majority by 3. It's hard because you have a guy like this loser, Massey. He's a real loser. And you have other guys that just automatically vote. No, Rand Paul. I always got along well with Rand Paul, but he's always, no vote. Someday you're going to have to explain it. Some psychiatrist ought to go see him.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1014, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Mr. Chair, I rise in support of our amendment. This is co-sponsored by Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania and Mr. Roy from Texas. And I regret that we have to offer this amendment. What I'm going to describe will probably sound like a bad science fiction movie, but that's what's written into law. Right now in law that's going to be implemented it says for 2026 and beyond. Now, the reality is the technology doesn't exist, but that doesn't keep legislators from imagining things that they would like to do to infringe on civil liberties. But there is a law that states that every vehicle manufactured is going to have a kill switch in it. The car itself will monitor your driving. And if the car thinks that you're not doing a good job driving, it will disable itself. So the car dashboard becomes your judge, your jury, and your executioner. Imagine this. We got a snowstorm coming. A mom takes her kids out. They're going to the grocery store. It's snowing. They're trying to get some groceries before the big storm hits. She swerves for a pothole. The neighbor's pet gets in the way, swerves for that. A first responder goes by. She pulls over. Her car says, "You got one more swerve, and then we're going to ground you." There it is. The next thing she has to avoid, an icy patch in the road. The car has adjudicated her as unsuitable for driving. It disables the vehicle, and there she's stranded. My question is, how do you appeal your sentence once your car, the technology in your car, has judged you to be incapable of driving? Once it's disabled you and your children at the side of the road, how do you appeal that? Do you press a button on the dashboard? Do you start talking to an AI? What if it really was somebody who was drunk? Are you really going to send a police car after this? Disabled vehicle? Do we have the resources to do that? There's going to be so many false positives. The technology is unworkable. That's why the DOT is still in the rulemaking process, asking for feedback on how this thing could even exist. And
how could that even exist? How can we have a car that's going to outthink you? I hate when machines try to think for me. that's built some sort of program that's going to do that. Maybe you guys are the same thing. I don't want it to try to guess what I'm going to do and then try to do it before I do it. I don't care if it's an elevator door or something that's happening in the car. Well, that passed, despite the resolution, despite the potential amendment to get rid of it. And so Tim Burchett, who voted for the minibus, who voted for the ICE thing, again, none of these guys seem to read the bill, or they're happy to compromise and spend billions of dollars on things they don't want because they want to put certain things in. This is why Mike Johnson is such a freaking scumbag. This is why Smithers makes me want to puke, because his claim that they were going to do 2023 onward after they vacated the chair and the GOP brought people in, the only promise that they never could deliver, and they always should have. It's the only thing that really mattered when we got a new Speaker of the House. Again, we're going back now, coming up on 2.5 years ago. We were told there would be no more minibuses, there'd be no more omnibuses, there would be single item appropriations. In other words, Congress would do the freaking job of Congress. And they're not doing it. And it doesn't matter whether it's about how they fund the government or whether they're going to subjugate themselves to the executive by giving away their war powers. It doesn't make a difference why they don't do the job of Congress. This is why our republic, I actually do agree with the woke farmer, William Kelly. The republic is no longer. We don't have a constitutional republic. We have a veneer of constitutionality because our country is no longer functioning as it was designed. Some of it was done legally, like the 16th and the 17th Amendment, which I harp on a regular basis. The fact that we have a centralized government that taxes us. The fact that we actually broke the Senate and it no longer is what the Senate was designed to be. We did that. And some of it Congress did to themselves, which is a problem because we sent them there to do a job. And this is before any of you were born. So if you're a boomer, if you're a silent generation, there is nobody who was old enough to be voting on these things in any meaningful block that did this work. Nobody that is alive today is responsible for creating the problem, but all of us have now eaten that problem, and we got to figure it out. That's the only way this country continues on. And it's not going to be able to save the republic. We have to recover the republic. There's something amusing about the term MAGA. And again, I said, I always thought that MAGA, Make America Great Again, meant Make America Constitutional Again. That means that it is not constitutional today. It needs to be recovered. Does it not? Those people who are being honest would know that. Here's Tim Burchett saying, they betrayed us. They, the GOP, the people that I generally vote for, even if I'm not one of them. They betrayed us, and Burchett's saying it in his own words. And sometimes he's right, and sometimes he's wrong. I don't love Tim Burchett. I don't hate Tim Burchett. I just look at him and try to call balls and strikes for what I think. And this one, I think he's on the ball, at least half the way there on the kill switch thing.
Hey everybody, Tim Burchett, leaving the House floor. Several bills tonight. I'm incredibly disgusted. We did pass the Department of Homeland Security appropriations bill. We got to have that. We got to have ICE. We got to have the people maintaining our border. A bill by Scott Perry out of Pennsylvania and Thomas Massey out of Kentucky, an amendment that would approve the use of the funds from the Infrastructure and Jobs Act to put these kill switches on. And I supported it. No, we don't need these kill switches because if somebody gets a DUI, they can arbitrarily, which is BS, you know where that'll head. Oh, we don't like that person. They owe us money. They don't vote right. They don't live right. I'm cutting their dadgum car off. And that's my biggest fear with electric vehicles. And that's where we're headed.
He voted for it, just so you know. The amendment failed, so he voted for it anyway. None of these people stand on principle. He's correct that it was a problem. He just told you. He said he's disgusted. But what did he do? He still voted for it, and he still gave them what they wanted. This sort of compromise because they're going to do something really evil, but we need some of the stuff that's in that bill. That instinct and the reason they do that is exactly why Mike Johnson is a speaker, and it's exactly why he's failed all of us. None of these people should be in office at this point. They've ceded the territory that is meant to be held by Congress as a Article I power. So whenever we decide to make America constitutional again, whatever that looks like, I don't think it's going to be an iteration of this government. I think this government ends up failing at some point in our lifetimes, because it can't keep doing what it does and still hold the veneer of legitimacy, especially if they don't fix the election problems. Guys, I'm not an expert on that stuff. I know plenty of you guys are. I get emails every time we bring up election integrity. There's a big issue there. It's just not my issue that I'm an expert on. So at some point, we'll bring people on that do have that if we're so inclined. But there's no instinct that I see because all these parties love it. They all love to do the same thing. And so nobody's going to fix it as long as they're in power. that doesn't leave a lot of options. Someone's going to have to start disregarding federal authority. That's a scary thing to think about because it means potentially a nonviolent revolution and potentially a violent revolution. And that's not me telling you to go do something. That's me saying, I think if we look at it honestly, that's where this thing goes. So that's a great note to go into the weekend. I hope you guys are having a decent one. I hope you have a warm one wherever you are. I just got a message from Garrett O'Boyle saying that it is colder in Milwaukee than it is in parts of Antarctica right now. So that's pretty funny. It's going to be really cold in Texas, and hopefully I can make it back home. But one way or another, we'll be back here on Monday for the Kyle Seraphin Show. We'll get back to you guys then. Before you do that, do me a favor. Either join us on Spotify as a backup, which would be great, KyleSeraphinShow.com. You can go ahead and bookmark that. You can add us there. You can follow us if you have a Spotify account. Maybe you download the app. You can also find us on Locals. We didn't do a call-in show this week because I'm on the road, but we'll get back to it next week on Thursday. And there's some things that I'm going to be showing you guys from SHOT Show, and you guys got a chance to request. Lastly, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Rumble, give me a like on the video. That would be great. Share it with a friend. And then if you have not already, subscribe to the channel. This is going to be a big year, I think, for the share, especially when we have people who are claiming certain things about other types of journal, claiming other things about other media personalities that they can't claim about this show. I did carry that badge. I have gone through the door with the FBI. I have seen some of the things that are out there, and I know what is what. Sometimes. I'll tell you when I don't, and I'll tell you when it's just my opinion and not some factual statement. That's what we're going to do here. We're going to continue to try to keep it as even keel as possible, and thank God today, a little bit of caffeine, you can tell my brain fires a little bit faster when I get to have some of that disgusting, hot, caffeinated beverage. It's really terrible. I drink so much coffee, it's not even funny. So I've been a little bit less than human for some of the other podcasts this week. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. I appreciate it. This has been a really good shakeout and trial of what we can and can't do on the road. I feel like I should give you a palate cleanse if I can find one. And I usually have one hanging out here. So maybe we'll just take a quick second, take a look, and see what's out there in the world. Did I grab one of these? Meh. I don't have something brand new. That's frustrating. Maybe we'll do this. Yeah, let's see what this one is. I don't know what it is. We're going to see if this is a palate cleanse or not. Maybe we'll feel terrible.
Old Nixon called the moon on a landline. He called them up and they answered straight away. They didn't have mobile phones back then, and they had to make notes with paper and a pen. But the landline worked and there wasn't a delay. Oh, they passed through radiation fire. They didn't conspire, so don't inquire. They didn't wear wires and they're not liars. They wore the attire, they're not actors for hire. Oh, they passed through radiation fire in a craft that looked like a tumble dryer. But they didn't wear wires and they're not liars. So just believe what I say.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, so maybe the moon landing was fake, too. Every time I see these things, I'm like, doggone it. Is everything a lie? Is that just what they do? All right, so I hope that's fun for you guys. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I look forward to it. Stay warm. See you back here at 0930 at our regular time, which I haven't been able to do since I've been on the road here. I'm 3 hours behind Eastern. We'll be back at the regular time, 0930 Eastern time, 8:30 Texas America Central on Monday morning. And God bless you. See you then.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.